I walked into the sunlit dining room of my parents' San Jose home, my heels clicking softly against the polished hardwood floor. The smell of fresh croissants and brewed coffee filled the air, a cruel contrast to the tension I felt tightening in my chest. Elijah was already there, perfectly composed in his tailored suit, his hand brushing ever so casually against Monroe's as she smiled at him with that infuriatingly innocent charm. My parents sat at the head of the table, their faces calm but their eyes betraying a cold, calculated purpose. "Sometimes the right thing hurts the most," my father said, his voice smooth but carrying a weight that made my stomach twist. My mother nodded in quiet agreement, placing a neatly folded envelope in front of me. I hesitated, fingers brushing the thick paper. Something about the scene felt surreal, like I was stepping into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I stole a glance at Monroe, who met my eyes briefly and smirked, the subtle triumph in her gaze cutting deeper than any knife. I opened the envelope. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the pre-drafted divorce petition, each page like a physical confirmation of betrayal. My mother's voice broke the silence. "It's for the greater good," she said, so gently it made my skin crawl. "Elijah and Monroe, they belong together. You're too mature for him. You'll understand someday." My father added, "Family isn't always love. Sometimes it's power dressed up in Sunday clothes." The words echoed around the room, sinking into me with a dull, persistent ache. Shock immobilized me. I could hear the ringing in my ears, my breath shallow, and the room seemed to tilt and spin. My mind raced back to my wedding day with Elijah, the sleepless nights helping him launch his startup, every sacrifice I had made silently, faithfully. And now, here I was, as if invisible, the target of a calculated maneuver. The prenuptial agreement stared back at me from the envelope, a secret clause that meant filing myself out of the equation would strip me of all rights to what I had helped build, my years of dedication rendered meaningless. Betrayal wasn't a word strong enough to capture the magnitude of it. I tried to confront Elijah. "Is this true?" I asked, my voice steady but trembling under the weight of disbelief. His eyes darted away, avoiding mine completely. Monroe's laugh was light, almost musical, but it dripped with smug satisfaction. "It's called compatibility," she said casually, as if I were an observer in someone else's story. My mother's expression remained serene, a cruel mirror of business-like detachment. "You'll land on your feet, you always do. Let Monroe have her chance," she added, as if handing someone else a promotion rather than taking away my marriage. I opened my mouth, anger rising like a tide ready to sweep me away, but I stopped. Raising my voice would make me seem hysterical. These were calculated professionals, not a family in turmoil. I needed to be sharper, smarter than they expected. I excused myself from the table, my hands shaking just enough to remind me I was still alive, still capable of thought, still capable of strategy. As I moved toward the sliding glass doors that led to the manicured garden, I caught Monroe whispering to Elijah, "By next week, the shares will be mine." My pulse quickened. The gaze I sent back was cold, measured, calculating. They thought I'd walk away quietly, bend under their manipulation, be subdued by their schemes. They thought wrong. Every step I took across the warm tiles, every measured breath, was part of a plan forming silently in my mind. This wasn't the end. It was a beginning, the first move in a game they thought they controlled. My heart raced, but my mind was steady. I had lost a sense of security, yes, but not my intelligence, not my resolve. The room, the brunch, the smiles, the pretense of normalcy, all of it would become fuel. And I would not falter. I didn't go home after leaving my parents' house. Instead, I walked toward the condo Elijah and I once shared, each step heavy with disbelief and simmering anger. The evening sun cast long shadows across the quiet streets of San Jose, a sharp contrast to the storm brewing inside me. At the building entrance, the guard gave me a scrutinizing look, hesitation etched on his face as if he sensed the tension clinging to me. I showed my old key, it still worked, But the moment I stepped inside, the place felt alien, rearranged by a hand that didn't care about my history here. Monroe's belongings were already neatly displayed, every detail carefully curated, as if she had been living here for months, claiming a space that once belonged to me. Monroe sat in the living room, a glass of red wine in her hand, her posture casual, almost smug. "Took you long enough," she said, her voice light yet edged with mockery. I froze, the words slicing through me with more precision than any accusation. I forced myself to step closer, eyes fixed on her. "How long?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. She tilted her head, her smirk widening. "Over a year. And it wasn't about love, if that's what you're thinking. It's about what I deserve, Elijah's company, his image, and, of course, a slice of what your parents call family balance." I sank into a chair across from her, numb with disbelief. Monroe leaned back, swirling her wine, as if this was a casual dinner conversation. She detailed how she had manipulated our parents, carefully crafting a narrative of emotional neglect during therapy sessions, framing herself as the overlooked daughter who finally found her voice. "You were the perfect daughter. I was just the louder one," she said. "And in this house, volume wins." I sat there, mouth dry, heart pounding, understanding for the first time how deep the betrayal went. My own family had been complicit. Every conversation, every sigh of disappointment I thought was random had been strategically engineered. I asked the question that burned in my chest: why now? Monroe's eyes glimmered, the triumph in her expression almost tangible. She explained that Elijah's upcoming corporate merger required the divorce. It was essential to secure company assets, and once married to her, Monroe would legally control key decisions as a proxy. My father had ensured this path, carefully positioning Monroe to inherit power under the guise of family loyalty. "Some families give you roots," Monroe said, almost tauntingly. "Mine gave me contracts." The weight of it pressed down on me. This wasn't about love, emotion, or betrayal of the heart. This was a calculated financial coup executed under the guise of familial duty. After leaving the condo, I sat in my car, engine off, staring at the dashboard, trying to absorb the full humiliation and depth of deception. I reflected on how I had always stayed quiet, done what was expected, offered my loyalty without complaint, and yet all of it had been invisible, taken for granted. I thought about my mother, about the women who quietly endure, and realized I had been on autopilot, expecting the world to recognize my sacrifices without asserting my own claim. A memory surfaced from years ago, a teacher's advice echoing in my mind: when the ground under you shifts, don't grab. Plant. And I understood. I wasn't powerless. I could process this humiliation, catalog every lie, every asset, every player in this game, and turn it to my advantage. Pain shifted into clarity, shame into strategy. The next morning, I called my attorney, voice calm but firm. "I want you to look into the proxy agreement between Monroe and Elijah," I said, the sentence short, deliberate, leaving no room for negotiation. I hung up, feeling the first spark of control since the weekend began. They had played this like a business maneuver. They should have expected a counteroffer. My mind raced with plans, contingencies, and possibilities. The pieces were all on the board now, and I was ready to start moving them, carefully, deliberately, with a patience sharpened by betrayal. I couldn't sleep that night. The apartment felt too quiet, too small, as if it were holding its breath alongside me. After hanging up with my attorney, I started sorting through old folders, the kind you keep tucked away, telling yourself one day they'll matter. That's when I found the photo album from college. I opened it, the smell of aged paper and faint coffee stains pulling me back to Boston, to days I had tried hard to forget. A receipt slipped out from a counseling session years ago, and my stomach twisted. My hands froze, lingering over that little piece of paper that once meant nothing but now screamed betrayal. Boston. Sophomore year. I had arrived on a scholarship, naive and eager, carrying hopes heavier than my suitcase. I'd barely settled into the rhythm of my classes when Monroe appeared, unannounced, claiming she wanted to visit. She stayed longer than expected, offering the warmth of sisterly concern, her presence softening the edge of loneliness that had settled in my dorm room. At first, I welcomed her, grateful for any semblance of family in a city where I felt invisible. But I later realized the visit had an agenda. My mother had sent Monroe with instructions: disrupt my relationship with a boyfriend deemed unworthy of my future. I remembered the counselor's office, the tight, sterile space where I sat, confused, as a woman I barely knew questioned my every word. "Why do you keep saying you want to disappear?" she asked, voice calm but firm. I hadn't said that, not once. My mother had whispered, manipulated, and written false narratives to make this happen, even having access to my records. It was a meticulous operation, masking control under concern. The anger that bubbled up then had no outlet. I was young, alone, and powerless to challenge the adults I trusted. The confrontation with my mother was almost comical in hindsight. "You're overthinking," she had said, dismissive, her tone polished, practiced. My father nodded along, his reasoning rehearsed. "We were just worried about your future." I lost the boyfriend and abandoned any faith in therapy for years. It was a systemic betrayal, a gaslight masquerading as family care. I remembered thinking, bitterly, in some families, mental health is only valid when it can be weaponized. That thought had burned, lodged in my mind alongside every injustice I'd endured. Back in the present, I saw the connections. The strategies used against me then were echoing in the decisions made by my parents and Monroe now. It wasn't just personal, it was procedural, a blueprint of manipulation that had followed me across time. I opened my laptop, the device feeling heavier than it should, and remembered that years ago I had stumbled upon emails between my mother and Monroe's HR contact, a trail of coordination meant to control and surveil me even from afar. The memory ignited a new clarity. This time, I had tools, digital footprints, the means to uncover every deception. I plugged in the old college laptop and opened the folders labeled archives. Files upon files of emails, notes, and records stared back at me, waiting to confirm what I had long suspected but never fully seen. A cold determination replaced the sorrow, the humiliation. They had trained me to fear what I remembered. Now, I feared what I might find, and I was ready to face it. With the evidence at my fingertips, the past was no longer a chain to hold me down. It was ammunition, raw and potent, for the strategy one had begun to build in the shadows of my apartment that long, sleepless night. The morning air in Palo Alto carried the faint scent of roasted coffee and ambition as I stepped into the lobby of the corporate headquarters. The glass doors gleamed under the soft sunlight, and employees turned their heads with polite curiosity. Security asked for my name, and I stated it with the kind of firmness that left no room for questioning. Each step toward the elevator felt deliberate, measured, as I rehearsed what I would say, how I would move through this boardroom battlefield without letting panic betray me. The elevator hummed upward, and with every floor, my pulse quickened. Reaching the executive level, I caught sight of the portraits lining the hallway. One empty plaque caught my eye, my name was gone. My stomach clenched. I had been visually erased, replaced by shadows of the legacy I thought I had built. Above, a corporate motto glimmered in metallic letters: "We build legacies, not shadows." The irony was sharp. The boardroom held the polished chill of formality, chairs meticulously arranged around the long table. I entered, noting every face, each posture, the way eyes flickered but avoided direct acknowledgement. The presentation had already begun, slides showcasing share prices, gala photographs, press releases, yet my contributions, my name, my presence, were absent. A slide of the founding team highlighted Monroe, Gideon, and others, but not me. A board member casually remarked, "We decided to streamline founders to those actively involved now." The words sank in, a knife wrapped in cordiality. I remained silent, waiting for the formal introduction that would never come, feeling the weight of erasure settle over me. After the session, I pulled Ronan aside, our legal counsel, demanding to see the original contract. He handed me a copy, and I scanned the pages, my breath catching when I found the clause I feared: founder rights to dividend revoked upon divorce decree. My father's signature glinted at the bottom of the revision. The betrayal ran deeper than the divorce ultimatum, extending into the months prior, carefully planned, meticulously executed. They had edited me out before I even had a chance to resist, a preemptive strike in the guise of corporate procedure. Anger surged, but I contained it, letting the realization crystallize into focused clarity. Sitting at my desk, the whispers of colleagues brushed past like a cold draft. Eyes avoided mine, wary of the storm I barely concealed. I began assembling my allies, mentally cataloging who could be trusted: Adeline, Quill, those with access to board logs and communications. I sent a discreet message to an inside contact, requesting audit logs of recent board modifications, my fingers tapping with calculated precision. Every step was a statement: my anger would fuel action, not destruction. I straightened my posture, my voice ready to speak, but patience tempered my fire. Scrolling through board minutes, my eyes landed on a notation that froze me: vote to remove founder rights, veil. They had scheduled the vote before I even walked through the doors. The room, the board, the people, all carefully orchestrated to leave me powerless, to rewrite history without confrontation. But the ink on paper had not yet dictated the future. I leaned back, letting the cold clarity of calculated vengeance settle over me. The shadows of the boardroom were theirs to wield, but I was already plotting in the light. The invitation had come addressed to the valets, a minor oversight by the event coordinators, yet it felt like fate handing me a second chance. Instead of discarding it, I saw the opportunity, a stage to assert my presence, to remind those who thought they had erased me that I was still here, and I was not silent. In my apartment, I selected a sharp, elegant outfit, one that commanded attention without screaming vengeance. I rehearsed the lines in my head, envisioning confrontations, carefully weighing words to expose, not to wound. Old emails and correspondence lay spread across the table, timelines of evidence I had meticulously assembled over the past few days. I whispered to myself, this time, I don't need to win. I just won't be erased. That mantra settled over me like armor, steadying my resolve as I left my apartment for the evening. Arriving at the Stanford banquet hall, the air buzzed with hushed conversations and the click of photographers' cameras. Heads turned, puzzled by my unexpected presence, and the hall's usual rhythm shifted. Monroe froze mid-toast, the champagne flute trembling slightly in her hand. Guests murmured softly, sensing the tension before understanding its origin. I walked with calm authority, every step measured, absorbing the curious glances without breaking stride. An older board member, passing close enough for only my ears to catch, whispered, "You were always the smarter Vale." The words carried a bittersweet ache, validation laced with the sting of memory, and I let it fuel the controlled fire rising within me. I found Monroe near the rear corridor, isolated from the main crowd, sipping her champagne with the grace she had cultivated over years of self-assured manipulation. My voice remained even, measured. "You built your empire on lies. I'm just here to make sure it doesn't last." Monroe's lips curled into a mocking smile, her eyes glinting with the practiced facade of the untouchable sister. "And what will the public think? The unstable ex making a scene?" she quipped, a dagger dressed in charm. I held my hidden recorder closer, a small device cloaked in discretion. Her facade slipped for a fraction of a second as she revealed details of her manipulations: charity funds used to silence those around the divorce, efforts to craft her perfect image. I let the words hang, my own calm a sharp contrast to the venom she could not hide. "If you cross me again," I said quietly, measured, "it won't be my silence you'll fear. It'll be the receipts." Later that night, with the gala fading into memory, I uploaded the recording to a secure server, anonymous but potent. I trusted Adelaine, a close ally running a mid-sized media blog, to share just enough. The leaked footage quietly found its way into the digital currents, not viral, but enough to make the right people notice. Monroe's carefully crafted innocent sister act crumbled for those who knew where to look. I did not gloat. Sitting back, I thought, the truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just walks into a room. A measured satisfaction settled over me, knowing the exposure was deliberate, strategic, and clean. Just before sleep claimed me, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You think you've exposed her. You haven't seen anything yet. I read it, a flicker of curiosity brushing against the calm armor I had built over the evening. I set the phone aside, unshaken, aware that the battle had only begun. But for the first time in months, I did not flinch. I was prepared, alert, and quietly ready for what was coming next. The drive to my parents' estate felt longer than usual, each mile a reminder that I was no longer the daughter who silently endured. I arrived under the pretense of a closure meeting, but my intentions were far sharper. The mansion stood the same, polished and imposing, yet emotionally I had changed. I was not the submissive girl anymore. In the living room, I waited, sensing the fragile calm behind the cautious smiles of my mother and Monroe. The air was thick with unspoken tension. I didn't mince words. I didn't come here for peace. I came for justice. My voice was steady, carrying the weight of evidence I had brought, video clips, documents, every thread of the carefully orchestrated betrayal. My mother, Lunette, began her rehearsed defense, speaking of doing what was best for the family's future, while Monroe, her posture perfect, interjected with a casual arrogance, "You think I needed her?" I already had the connections. I countered sharply, each word deliberate, slicing through their protective facades. "You used me as a shield. You sold my name." I laid out the facts, board meeting minutes, emails, signed amendments, a meticulous presentation that turned the balance of power. Their polite masks faltered, unease flickering in their eyes as I exposed the depths of their manipulation. For the first time, the quiet authority of the daughter became palpable in the room. Lunette attempted to salvage the encounter, pleading for peace, offering a public statement to restore my reputation. Monroe, performing for the staff and cameras, delivered a half-hearted apology, twisting herself as the victim. I never asked to take what wasn't mine. I only did what I thought was best. I recognized the charade immediately, no remorse, only a strategic performance. My anger rose, a controlled flame, and I refused to accept the cheap apology. I demanded full accountability, each phrase articulated with precision, each observation laced with the evidence I carried. They had underestimated me, and I was determined to ensure that their calculations would not hold. The garden became my stage for subtle leverage. I indicated a live feed without overtly drawing attention, alerting my legal team to prepare a simultaneous press release. I contacted a sole trend and key shareholders, warning them that I would challenge the meeting's legitimacy publicly. My internal voice was clear and unyielding. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I'm demanding fairness. Every movement, every glance, was calibrated, each step measured to assert dominance without losing composure. The quiet tension built around me, but I remained unshaken, a figure of resolve and calculated power. As daylight waned, my phone buzzed with a text from Monroe. "Your move just exposed more than you know." I read it without a flinch. The evening had been mine, the proof laid bare, yet the game was far from over. I looked around the estate grounds, the shadows of the tall trees stretching long and dark across the lawn. If she thought this encounter had finished me, she was gravely mistaken. I had risen from silence into strategy, and every hand I played next would be deliberate, precise, and unrelenting. The moment I stepped into the private study at the family estate, the weight of anticipation pressed on me like the heavy curtains blocking the afternoon sun. Adeline handed me a sealed envelope, its edges crisp, the signature of my late father Hollis clear across the top. I felt a pulse of shock and cautious hope as I broke the seal. Inside lay a confession I had longed for but never expected. He had always intended for me to inherit the family legacy, regretted allowing Lynette and Mars to push me aside. I read aloud the lines, each syllable echoing in the quiet room. I feared I had raised daughters who would fight over my name rather than honor it. The words resonated deep, a bitter validation that carved 3 years of betrayal. For the first time, I held undeniable leverage, a silent authority that shifted the balance irrevocably. I acted carefully, ensuring the letter reached key board members and select media contacts in a controlled manner. Within hours, the fallout began. Investors and executives publicly withdrew support from Mars as CEO. The confident mask she had worn so long began to falter. Monroe and Lynette moved frantically behind the scenes, trying to contain the damage, but the cracks were irreversible. The air was thick with tension. Victory felt sweet but laced with the bitterness of knowing it had come from the same source of betrayal that had haunted me. Each announcement, each shifting allegiance, cemented my position, a strategic crescendo in a long symphony of calculated moves. Mars attempted to reclaim control, staging a press conference under the guise of unity. She spoke of shared visions, of reconciliation, a plan designed to salvage her reputation. I watched from backstage, counting the reporters who turned their cameras away, noting the skeptical murmurs rippling through the room. Inside, I couldn't help but think, she's begging to stay relevant now. What a difference a letter makes. I resisted the urge to speak, to intervene publicly. Letting the press witness her unraveling became a quieter, more powerful form of confrontation. Quietly, I consolidated my gains. I proposed a shareholder meeting to reassign executive roles, reaching out to Isolde Trent and other dissident shareholders. Letters of intent were secured, formal motions drafted. I returned to the family estate, stepping into the office I once shared with Elijah. The room felt smaller now, yet it symbolized reclamation. I ran my fingers along the empty nameplate slot, envisioning my name filling it. The gesture was private but potent, a reclamation of space and authority long denied. As evening settled, I checked my email and found a message that made my chest tighten. This is just the beginning. You will regret bringing the past to daylight. I stared at the screen, unmoved. Threats had lost their power. I feared nothing more than regret. The tables had turned, and for the first time in decades, I was the one holding the board, the estate, and the narrative in my hands. I had become the measured storm, calm on the surface but devastating beneath. Late that evening, I found myself pacing the rooftop of our San Francisco corporate building, the city lights below flickering like distant stars, taunting in their indifference. My mind refused to quiet down as I revisited Elijah's email timelines and recent financial transfers, noticing subtle inconsistencies that gnawed at my gut. Something felt wrong, off, and I needed clarity. Back in our shared office, I rifled through drawers and stumbled upon an old encrypted USB, the kind we once laughed over, marveling at our paranoia. I handed it to a trusted tech friend who worked late into the night to decrypt it. When the files finally revealed themselves, my world tilted. Elijah hadn't been a mere pawn. He had been an active participant, carefully coordinating with Monroe, discrediting me for his gain. My hands trembled, a mix of heartbreak and a cold, precise fury settling over me. He didn't just let them lie. He was one of them, I whispered, the wind carrying my words into the dark expanse. Simultaneously, my legal team uncovered anomalies in Monroe's charity foundation, financial breadcrumbs leading to a sealed arrest warrant from the DA's office. The document wasn't public yet, but the weight of it settled heavily in my chest. I met with my attorney, the dim light casting sharp lines across our faces. Let her fall quietly, or make her burn in public, he asked. I didn't hesitate. Public, I decided. There would be no quiet justice for a woman who built her empire on deceit, who masked manipulation with a polished smile. Vengeance was not sweet, it was deliberate, measured, and heavy. I felt the gravity, but I also felt clarity, knowing the exposure had to be mine to control. Later, I arranged a meeting with Elijah atop the rooftop of our old headquarters. He looked defensive, shadows flickering across his face in the low light. "I had to survive," he muttered. "I thought you'd be fine." I shook my head, every word I had rehearsed cascading effortlessly, sharp and calm. "You didn't just betray me. You sold me out like I was your insurance policy. No yelling, no dramatics, just precision." I played back part of the recording, letting his own actions indict him. There was no room for forgiveness. I told him, simply, that his shares were frozen and turned away, leaving the rooftop with the wind carrying away the last remnants of trust. Hours later, Monroe's downfall was executed as planned. During her panel discussion on women in power, she was handcuffed in front of a live audience, the cameras capturing her shock and denial. The footage went viral within hours, though I watched it not with joy, but with solemn calm. Boardroom allies messaged me, "She's out. You're in." I exhaled deeply, approaching the old desk where my nameplate now awaited. I slid it into place, the words clear, "Chairwoman Vale." A quiet reclaiming of what had always been mine, now unmistakable. That night, the phone buzzed with a voicemail that sent a shiver down my spine. The voice was low, deliberate, chilling. "You think this is the end? Your family's sins go deeper than this." I sat back, letting the words settle. Fear no longer controlled me. I wasn't flinching. I was ready to dig, ready to confront every hidden deception, ready to reclaim the legacy stolen from me. The weight of betrayal was still heavy, but for the first time in years, it fueled clarity, not despair. Morning sunlight spilled over the private estate, washing the grounds in a quiet, steady gold that felt almost like a cleansing. I walked slowly through the familiar paths, each step a reminder of battles fought and lessons learned. The company's offices were calm now, my authority unquestioned, the financial recovery complete. Sitting with loyal colleagues, I let myself acknowledge the small victories: emails sent, initiatives restored, old injustices corrected. Amid the routine of triumph, a surprise arrived, a hidden will from my late great-uncle, long tucked away, confirming my full inheritance. I held the document in my hands, absorbing the weight of justice delayed but delivered. Everything I lost was a lesson, not a sentence, I whispered to myself, letting the truth settle with pride tempered by the scars of betrayal. Relief mixed with lingering pain, but I finally felt my footing solid. Family confessions followed, quiet and hesitant. A distant cousin, someone who had observed but never acted, admitted to past manipulations, remorse evident in every word. I listened, absorbing the truths without interruption, aware that the healing required both honesty and boundaries. Some reconciliations were possible, tentative bridges across old chasms, but trust would need time to rebuild. Patterns emerged clearly, and I vowed silently never to be silenced again. Forgiveness, I realized, is a choice, not an obligation, and I could extend it on my terms. The conversation closed with an uneasy civility, and I left the room feeling stronger, anchored by awareness rather than anger. Public recognition arrived next. Media outlets, careful and measured, acknowledged the arc of my journey: resilience under betrayal, intelligence under siege, strategy when sidelined. Letters and messages arrived from women inspired by my story, each one a quiet testament that endurance and sharp judgment could indeed carve a path through deception. Later, at a keynote for female leadership, I stood calm and commanding, words deliberate, presence unmistakable. The audience responded, not to a story of revenge, but to the embodiment of quiet strength, the result of careful strategy and unwavering clarity. Respect had been earned, not demanded. In the late afternoon, I found a private moment at a secluded beach, waves brushing the shore like the passage of time itself. I reflected on growth, scars, and victories, the ocean carrying away the last traces of doubt. I considered next steps, a philanthropic initiative, mentorship programs, and personal life recalibrated around choice rather than obligation. The horizon was open, not every wound healed, but every step forward deliberate. As I looked to the water stretching endlessly before me, I felt an unshakable clarity. I finally understood what I had been fighting for all along, myself.